He didn't give away $300 million just to feel good. He gave it away to win, to control the narrative. And in doing that, he turned Salesforce into this $250 billion empire. That's quite a bold claim, isn't it? Maybe even a bit provocative.
It certainly grabs your attention.
Yeah, exactly. But it's the core idea we're really digging into today on the deep dive. We want to cut through the usual takes, the conventional wisdom, and really get to the heart of what fueled this, well, pretty unique rise in the tech world. Today we're focused on Marc Benioff, the co-founder of Salesforce. Now, when you picture a tech billionaire, you might think of, I don't know, rockets, maybe, or just hoarding immense wealth quietly.
That's the common image, sure.
Right. But Benioff, he doesn't quite fit that mold. What's really extraordinary, I think, is that he committed this huge sum, $300 million, to philanthropy, but not after he hit it big, not as some kind of end-of-career thing.
No, it was baked in right from the start, essentially.
Exactly. It was an integral part of building Salesforce into the giant it is today. I mean, just think about that for a second. Giving away massive amounts of money as a core business strategy.
It fundamentally challenges how we think about building a company.
Totally. And just to give you a sense of the scale here, as of, say, June 2025, Salesforce is valued around $250 billion. It's the dominant CRM platform, customer relationship management on the planet.
Unquestionably dominant.
And Benioff himself. Forbes puts his net worth at about $8.1 billion. But like I said, this deep dive isn't really about the size of the fortune, or even Salesforce's market cap, impressive as that is. It's about the formula.
The how.
Yeah, the how. Because what if I told you that this massive $300 million commitment wasn't actually a cost to his business? What if it was, in fact, a really powerful strategic catalyst?
That's the counterintuitive part you mentioned.
Right. So our mission today is to explore exactly how Marc Benioff turned charity, or maybe philanthropy is a better word, into a cornerstone of his business strategy. We'll look at how he used compassion, social responsibility, not just, to do good things for the world, but also to seriously grow an empire. And the insights we uncover, they could genuinely reshape how you see modern business, maybe what power really means, and the role of purpose in this interconnected world we live in.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We're diving into this idea. Strategic generosity. Sounds a bit odd at first, maybe.
It does sound counterintuitive, definitely. But what's truly fascinating here, as you said, is the timing and the sheer scale of Benioff's commitments, especially when you compare it to, well, traditional corporate giving.
Yeah, it's not the usual playbook.
Not at all. This isn't the give back once you've already succeeded story we hear so often. This is about fundamental integration, weaving social responsibility into the actual fabric, the DNA of the business from day one.
Like intrinsically linked.
Precisely. He really challenged the conventional wisdom, didn't he? He proved that what most people would just see as a cost, a big financial hit, could actually be a profound long-term investment.
Which raises a big question, right?
It does. It raises a really important question for anyone listening, whether you're running a company, leading a team, or even just thinking about starting something. How exactly do values, when they're genuinely lived and operationalized inside a business, become a real multiplier for results, not just some nice-to-have thing on the side?
Yeah, not just a line item. How does it actually amplify things?
What's the actual mechanism there? That's what's so interesting to unpack.
That's a perfect lead-in to what Benioff called his money mindset. Because he never treated social responsibility like an add-on, something you tack on later when the profits are rolling in.
Right, it wasn't an afterthought.
Not at all. He saw it as a different type of capital. Most businesses, they obsess over financial capital, right? Cash, assets, the balance sheet.
Standard stuff.
But Benioff saw something else, something maybe more resilient, more durable, trust capital, brand capital, moral capital. He viewed these almost like intangible assets.
Assets that compound, perhaps.
Exactly. He believed they'd compound over time, building what some analysts have called this sort of impenetrable shield around Salesforce, protecting it from, the public opinion storms, the ethical crises that seem to hit so many other big companies.
Building resilience through reputation.
Yeah. And when he started Salesforce back in '99, he wasn't just building CRM software. He said he was building a new business religion, which is quite a statement.
It is, especially at that time in Silicon Valley.
Right. While everyone else in the Valley was obsessed with blitzscaling, growth at all costs, chasing the big exit, Benioff was doing something different. Quietly, but profoundly, embedding this really radical idea into the company's DNA.
The 1-1-1 model.
The 1-1 model. And this wasn't just some vague mission statement on a poster. It was concrete. measurable from day one.
Can you break that down? What did the 111 actually mean in practice?
Sure. So first one, 1% of the company's equity, its ownership, earmarked to fund social change. I mean, think about that. Giving away a piece of the company itself before you're even profitable.
That takes some serious conviction. And guts, frankly.
No kidding. Then, the second, 1% of the product, Salesforce's software, given free to nonprofits, giving them access to these powerful tools that usually only big corporations could afford.
Leveling the playing field a bit, technologically speaking.
Exactly. And the third one, 1% of employee time, paid time, mind you, to be spent volunteering in the community. It's simple on the surface, but deeply radical when you think about the implications.
And it's absolutely crucial to understand the context of that time, right? When Benioff first pitched this 111 idea, the reaction from VCs, from the money people.
Skepticism.
Oh, major skepticism. It wasn't just a little doubt, it was almost universal disbelief. By any conventional measure, it sounded, frankly, reckless.
Why give away equity when you need every cent?
Exactly. Why commit a chunk of your precious equity when you're pre-profit, burning cash, just to survive? Why give away your valuable software when you desperately need every single dollar of revenue to prove your model works?
It goes against the standard startup playbook.
Completely. Most startups then, and maybe even now, are laser focused on immediate growth, immediate revenue, hitting those milestones. Benioff, however, clearly saw this differently. He saw social responsibility not as a cost center or a luxury, but as a core differentiator.
Something foundational.
Yes, something foundational that would set Salesforce apart in the long run, building value in ways that maybe weren't immediately obvious on a quarterly report. Which brings us back to that question. How do you measure the ROI on something like moral capital? It grows differently, but it clearly adds strength.
It's a fascinating paradox. And despite all that early skepticism, Benioff didn't budge. Not one bit. His focus was always the long game.
Beyond the next quarter.
Way beyond. Not just year to year. He was thinking generation to generation. He famously said, and this quote really sums it up, "The business of business is improving the state of the world."
Which is a direct challenge to the Milton Friedman idea that the only business of business is profit.
Absolutely. And the compelling part is, he didn't just say it. He actually built the company around it. So how did that translate into real impact? Let's say by 2020, roughly 2 decades in.
Well, the numbers are pretty staggering. By 2020, that 111 commitment was generating over $100 million a year in grants to various causes worldwide.
Wow, $100 million a year.
Yeah. And beyond the cash, the model had mobilized employees to contribute more than 3 million volunteer hours globally. Think about that collective human effort.
That's huge.
And crucially, it empowered over 40,000 nonprofits around the world with free access to Salesforce's platform, giving them enterprise-level tech to manage their work, their fundraising, their outreach.
So not just goodwill, it's infrastructure.
Exactly. It's building the infrastructure of compassion, as you put it. And it was cultivating this reputation, this brand identity, as a meticulously crafted long-term strategic asset.
And inside the company, how is it operationalized? You mentioned the volunteer time.
Right. Every single employee gets 56 paid hours a year just for volunteering. That's not just a small perk buried in the handbook. It's a huge cultural signal.
It says, we value this.
Precisely. It says, we expect you to engage with the community, and this is part of your job here. Teams aren't just allowed to volunteer together. They're actively encouraged, even expected, to take on community projects. It's woven into the team dynamic.
So what were the tangible returns on this investment in, as you called it, moral capital? How did it affect things like employee engagement, retention metrics that are incredibly important, especially in tech?
The results were really compelling. Salesforce consistently started showing up on lists of the most admired workplaces in America year after year.
Not just hype, actual recognition.
Right. And beyond the awards, they reported incredibly high retention rates, over 90% in key departments by 2024. Now think about that in the context of the tech industry.
Which is notorious for churn.
Exactly. In an era where we hear constantly about quiet quitting, burnout, general disengagement, Salesforce stood out. It consistently ranked among the most purposeful companies on earth.
And that has bottom line impact, right? Less turnover, more productivity.
Absolutely. Reducing turnover saves enormous costs, and engaged, motivated employees are simply more productive. It's a direct contribution. And what we saw consistently was that customers noticed this commitment wasn't just talk. Employees stayed because they felt connected to something bigger. And investors, they gained confidence. Not despite the philanthropy, but often because of it.
It became a positive feedback loop.
It did. Benioff's philosophy seems clear. Give early, give consistently, and give in ways that fundamentally shape your company's identity. Because in the long run, values aren't a trade-off against profit, they're the multiplier.
That perfectly sets up the next phase. If the 1-1-1 model was the foundation, the bedrock for this new business religion, then that huge $300 million commitment we mentioned earlier, that was the blueprint for impact on a massive scale.
Right, taking it to a whole new level.
And this wasn't just writing a big check. You described it as weaponized philanthropy. Tell us more about that specific commitment.
Indeed. So in 2021, Mark and his wife Lynn announced this really sweeping $300 million pledge, and it was specifically targeted climate action and ecological restoration.
Very focused.
Very focused. But like you said, it was much more than just a donation. He didn't just give it away, he deployed it. Think of it like a general strategically placing assets on a chessboard.
Not retreating from capitalism, but reshaping the battlefield.
Exactly. Reshaping the battlefield itself. And this is where that idea of weaponized philanthropy really comes in. It's about leveraging social impact to achieve concrete strategic business outcomes. Outcomes that go way beyond what traditional CSR, corporate social responsibility, usually aims for.
CSR often feels like it's about mitigating harm or just doing good on the side.
Right. This is different. This is active strategic deployment, using philanthropy as a tool for influence, reputation, and ultimately competitive advantage.
Okay, so how was this $300 million actually designed? You mentioned it was meticulously planned. What were the main prongs of the strategy, and how did they tie back to Salesforce itself?
It was absolutely meticulously designed, a three-pronged strategy, and each part was very carefully aligned, not just with general doing good, but specifically with Salesforce's brand, its culture, and its future influence.
Okay, prong one.
First, $100 million went to create the Benioff Time Tree Fund. The goal was incredibly ambitious: reforesting the Amazon rainforest and directly supporting the indigenous communities who are the primary stewards of those vital ecosystems.
Huge environmental goal. But you mentioned branding, too.
Yes, because beyond the crucial environmental impact, it was also brilliant emotional branding. Think about the image. Salesforce actively planting trees, restoring ecosystems, while some other big tech companies were perhaps facing criticism for their carbon footprint or energy use.
That contrast is powerful.
Incredibly powerful. That kind of positive association, connecting the brand with a global movement for good. It cultivates goodwill you just can't buy with advertising. It's priceless.
Okay, that's the tree fund. What was the second $100 million for?
The second $100 million was channeled through Time Ventures. This is a venture capital fund specifically focused on investing in climate tech startups.
Ah, so this is investment, not just donation.
Exactly. This is where you see the dual benefit very clearly. It moves beyond pure philanthropy into strategic investment. Benioff wasn't just a donor here. He became an investor in the future of climate solutions.
So these startups are tackling climate change.
Yes, tackling critical climate crises, but simultaneously they were becoming potential strategic allies for Salesforce in the rapidly growing sustainability sector. Investing in them positioned Salesforce right at the heart of innovation.
Which could lead to new partnerships, new markets.
Potentially new revenue streams, enhancing their own sustainability offerings, building a whole ecosystem of partners for the future. It's very forward-thinking.
Smart. And the third $100 million.
The third piece came directly from the Salesforce Foundation. This was dedicated to powering nonprofit grants, expanding those crucial employee volunteering programs we talked about, and providing free or discounted tech tools to NGOs, non-governmental organizations worldwide.
So reinforcing the core model.
Precisely. This wasn't a general fund. It explicitly embedded Salesforce even deeper into the global social sector, making sure their product and their people were directly contributing. And, critically, it allowed their own employees to actively live their values on company time, giving them a tangible, company-supported way to engage with causes they care about.
So pulling it all together, this $300 million wasn't just money leaving the business. It was actually being woven into the business, into its core operations and identity.
Folded right in.
And it seems to have worked out pretty well for them. Around the same time this whole strategy was unfolding, Salesforce's market value blew past $250 billion, making it one of the most valuable software companies anywhere.
The correlation is hard to ignore.
It certainly doesn't look like a coincidence. Can you elaborate a bit more on that weaponized philanthropy concept? How does it actually work to, say, disarm critics or maybe preempt regulation or build market positions in ways traditional marketing just can't.
That's really the crux of it. Weaponized philanthropy as a term maybe sounds a bit aggressive, but it captures how it goes beyond just passive CSR. It's about actively using social impact for tangible, strategic business results.
What kind of result?
It generates these incredibly valuable, intangible assets that money alone often struggles to buy. Things like deep, almost unwavering loyalty from customers who align with your values, undeniable credibility with governments, regulators, and the public. And crucially, a kind of protective shield, that moral moat we mentioned against public scrutiny.
A moat built of goodwill.
Essentially, yes. Once you've genuinely cultivated that level of trust and positive reputation, the financial benefits often follow because it creates this buffer. For instance, if a competitor faces a scandal over, say, labor practices, Salesforce's consistent, demonstrable actions on social issues create a stark contrast. It subtly disarms potential critics before they even start.
And a regulatory angle.
Their deep involvement in areas like climate action can position them as partners with regulators, not just subjects of regulation. They'd invited to the table to help shape solutions rather than just having rules imposed on them. That gives them a voice in shaping the future landscape.
That makes sense. And connecting it back to those climate tech investments.
Those strategic alliances formed through investing. That's not just charity. It's incredibly smart ecosystem building. By backing these emerging companies, Salesforce isn't just supporting climate solutions, it's positioning itself at the center of future innovation in that space.
Setting themselves up for the future.
Absolutely. It could lead to new revenue streams, new markets, a stronger network. The ripple effects are profound. Governments trust you more, communities embrace you, top talent wants to work for you, employees stay longer, and customers choose you not just for your product features, but for what you represent. That's cultural leverage.
Using values as an external driver.
Exactly. Salesforce's values aren't just internal guidelines. They become external drivers of business success, shaping their market position and influence.
It really is a stark contrast when you look at how other big tech CEOs have sometimes struggled with PR crises or trying to handle ESG issues, environmental, social, governance almost reactively.
Like damage control.
Like damage control. Whereas Salesforce, under Benioff, seems to have been proactively invited into the global conversation on these critical issues, shaping it, rather than just responding to it.
It's a fundamental shift in posture.
So this level of strategic deployment, it wasn't just about the money, was it? It was really deeply about embedding purpose into the company's day-to-day operations, and maybe most importantly, into its culture. How does that actually work on the ground? How do you scale culture like that?
You've hit on probably the most critical piece. Marc Benioff understood this very early on. You don't build company culture in boardrooms drafting mission statements. You don't build it by putting inspiring posters on the wall.
It's built in behavior.
It's built fundamentally in behavior, daily behavior. You can have the most beautiful values written down, but if people don't actually love them every day, if they don't see leaders living them, they mean absolutely nothing. Benioff embedded compassion not as some side project, but as a daily expected practice at every level of Salesforce.
And how did that daily expected practice manifest for employees? What did it look like?
Well, it started with that simple but powerful habit. Those 56 hours of paid volunteer time every year for every single employee, from the brand new intern right up to the top executives.
That sends a message.
It sends a huge cultural signal, loud and clear. It says, we expect you to care about the world outside your immediate job, and we value it so much we'll pay you to do it. This is part of being here. Imagine the impact of that. The stories shared, the team bonding on volunteer projects, it weaves those values right into the daily work experience.
And this simple model, scaled up over years, turned Salesforce into what people now call a mission-driven machine. You mentioned the volunteer hours, over 6.3 million logged by 2024. That's not just charity, that's employee engagement at an incredible scale. What were the internal benefits beyond just feeling good?
It cultivated this extraordinary level of employee loyalty. And it built that moral moat internally as well as externally. In an industry, as we said, known for high turnover, burnout, disengagement, Salesforce consistently kept reporting over 90% employee retention in key departments through 2024.
That's a huge competitive advantage in itself.
Massive. And it wasn't just a statistic. When you talk to employees, many explicitly said they stayed not just for the salary or the stock options, which are obviously important in tech, but because they genuinely felt proud of what the company stood for.
Pride. That's interesting.
Pride is an incredibly powerful and maybe often underestimated retention factor, especially in competitive fields where money alone often isn't enough to keep top talent long term. People want to feel like they belong to something meaningful, something bigger than just the next product cycle.
And you mentioned the moral moat externally, too. While competitors were maybe dealing with backlash over layoffs or tax issues or toxic culture claims, Benioff was out there sponsoring climate summits, funding hospitals, marching for LGBTQ plus rights. It creates a very different public image.
A starkly different narrative.
So how does this mission-driven machine translate into actual organizational resilience? How does it provide a competitive edge?
Well, when values are that deeply ingrained, the company just becomes inherently more robust. It's better equipped to weather storms, whether they're economic downturns or shifts in the industry or public opinion crises. It gives them a kind of social license to operate that companies focus purely on short-term profit might lack.
It connects back to that quote you mentioned.
Yes, Benioff's quote, "If capitalism isn't inclusive, it will collapse. Culture is how we protect it." That philosophy sees culture not just as a soft HR thing, but as a fundamental protective mechanism, essential for the legitimacy and longevity of the whole capitalist system from his perspective. It's quite pragmatic, actually.
And it became self-reinforcing, you said.
It really seems to have become a virtuous cycle. The more Salesforce authentically gave and acted on its values, the more top talent it attracted people specifically looking for purpose-driven work. The more positive impact it made, the more trust it earned from everyone, the public, customers, partners, and the more trust it earned, the more customers and even entire countries wanted to partner with them.
So purpose drove talent, which drove impact, which drove trust, which drove business.
Exactly. Marc Benioff didn't just scale a culture of high performance, though they certainly performed. He scaled a culture of purpose. And that's a key reason why Salesforce didn't just grow its valuation. It became something people genuinely wanted to belong to, almost a movement as much as a company.
This idea of deeply embedded purpose, the scaling of culture through compassion. It's clearly not just about making Salesforce a nice place to work. It seems like a direct reflection of Benioff's own integrated philosophy of business and life. Like he doesn't put them in separate boxes.
That's exactly right. He really doesn't seem to compartmentalize business and personal philanthropy in the way many other leaders do. He doesn't seem to ask, okay, I've made my fortune, now how much can I give back?
It's a different question he's asking.
It seems to be a far more profound question. What kind of world am I actively building with every business decision I make, with every philanthropic investment I deploy? His core belief is quite fascinating. He argues that capitalism, if it's just left unchecked, can be destructive, leading to inequality, environmental damage.
But he's not anti-capitalist.
Not at all. But he believes when capitalism is consciously redirected, when it's infused with compassion and a deep sense of responsibility, it actually becomes the most powerful force for positive progress we have. And that, he argues, is why he doesn't wait until retirement to give away wealth. He invests during his career using the full power of his platform and resources right now.
And not just writing checks, you said. Re-engineering systems.
Exactly. He seems focused on trying to shift the underlying structures, not just patching problems with donations, trying to change how business itself operates for the better.
Can you give us a really concrete example of that systems change approach in action?
Absolutely. A great example is that massive $275 million donation he and his wife made to UCSF Medical Center back in 2019.
The largest gift in their history, right?
Yes, the largest individual gift ever to UCSF. But the key wasn't just the amount, it was the focus. The impact wasn't just about, say, building a new hospital wing or funding general research. It was laser-focused on equity.
How so?
The gift was specifically designed to expand access to high-quality healthcare for underserved communities right there in San Francisco, particularly Black, Latino, and immigrant populations. It was a targeted investment aimed at tackling systemic health disparities, using healthcare as the lever.
So using philanthropy to address specific social justice issues.
Precisely. It wasn't just doing good, it was strategic intervention in a system. And you saw a similar dynamic that same year with the homelessness crisis in California.
Proposition C. That was controversial.
Very controversial. Benioff threw his weight, personally and publicly, behind Proposition C. This was the measure proposing a tax on big corporations to fund public housing and mental health services. It faced fierce opposition, including from some of his prominent tech CEO peers, like Jack Dorsey.
But Benioff didn't back down.
Not at all. He famously went on Twitter and basically called them out, saying something like, "You can't claim you care about San Francisco and fight Prop C, pick a side." It was very direct.
And a measure pass.
It did. And Salesforce willingly paid millions more in taxes as a result. Because Benioff seemed to believe it was essential to fixing the system from within, even if it meant a direct financial cost to his own company. It wasn't about dodging the tax, it was about embracing the responsibility.
That kind of integrated mindset really does seem to turn philanthropy from just a moral duty into like a strategic compass for the whole company. It influences not just where the money goes, but how the business itself operates.
Absolutely. For Benioff, ESG, environmental, social governance, clearly wasn't just a box-ticking exercise or a burden. He genuinely seems to view it as the new competitive edge.
Which is very different from companies that might see ESG mostly as a cost center or something you do to avoid bad press.
A completely different framing. And we saw this philosophy play out again when Wall Street inevitably started pushing for layoffs to boost short-term stock prices during downturns. Benioff resisted those pressures more than many others.
Reinforcing that purpose wasn't negotiable.
Exactly. It seemed to reinforce his core belief that purpose wasn't just a flexible part of the strategy you could adjust based on market winds, it was fundamental. His actions consistently echo that statement he makes often. Business is the greatest platform for change, but only if we choose to use it that way.
And his career path seems like Exhibit A for that belief.
It really does. His life and the trajectory of Salesforce serve as powerful evidence for that conviction. And when you think about it, when you invest so deeply in people, in public health, in community infrastructure, in dignity, you're not really just giving money away in the traditional sense.
What are you doing then?
You're essentially buying time. You're buying societal resilience. You're investing in the very health of the ecosystem your business needs to thrive in. You're buying maybe a future that's actually worth leading in. It's a strategic investment in the long-term viability of everything.
And this whole integrated approach, this fusion of business and purpose, it gives Benioff a unique kind of power, doesn't it? An influence that goes way beyond just selling software or dominating the CRM market.
It really does. It seems like Marc Benioff isn't just donating. He's actively trying to design the future with every dollar he commits, with every initiative he launches.
That's a key distinction, right? Most billionaires, historically, tend to make their big philanthropic splashes after they've secured their power, built their empires, maybe step back from the day-to-day.
It's often seen as a legacy-building activity done later in life.
Right. But Benioff seems to do the opposite. He uses philanthropy while he's building as a tool to build power and influence in real time, not just market power, but something else. Agenda-setting power.
Agenda-setting power is a great way to put it. He's not just funding someone else's existing vision or project. He's actively shaping the entire conversation around critical global issues. He's setting the terms of the debate.
And when you control the conversation,
you effectively start to influence the culture itself. Take climate change again. It's a prime example. He's not just planting some trees to offset Salesforce's carbon footprint, which is what many companies do.
That's bigger than that.
Much bigger. He's actively building global coalitions. That Benioff Time Tree Fund, backed by his $100 million, has forged these significant partnerships with governments, with indigenous leaders who hold traditional knowledge, with activists on the ground, all aimed at accelerating reforestation on a massive scale. They're not just donors, they're conveners.
And the optics of that, the branding effect we talked about,
right?
It's huge. Salesforce isn't just seen as a tech company. They're strategically positioning themselves as a planet company.
Exactly. And that resonates incredibly deeply today with consumers, with employees, especially younger generations, and increasingly with investors too. Look at his presence at the World Economic Forum in Davos.
He's a regular there.
He's a fixture. But he doesn't just show up as another tech CEO. He chairs the climate panels. He actively lobbies governments on environmental policy. He gets invited into those closed-door rooms where real global policy is hammered out, not just the rooms where software deals get done.
That's intentional influence building.
Absolutely deliberate. It's a strategy to embed his perspective and, by extension, Salesforce's values at the highest levels of the global decision-making, moving from being just a player in the market to being a shaper of the global agenda.
And the trust factor you mentioned earlier must be key here.
Paramount. When you're consistently seen year after year as a genuine leader on ethics, on sustainability, on inclusion, You're not just respected in a business sense, you are deeply trusted.
And trust equals leverage.
Immense leverage. Leverage to influence regulations that might affect your industry. Leverage to attract the absolute best talent, the people who want their work to mean something. And leverage to simply outlast competitors who are only focused on the next quarter's earnings without that deeper mission anchoring them. It's a powerful, long-term competitive advantage built on reputation and trust.
And it seems to go beyond just environmentalism or social issues. He bought Time magazine in 2018. That wasn't a typical tech billionaire move.
No, it wasn't. And he was very clear about why. Not for vanity, he said. Not just as a side project. He framed it as needing to protect truth itself. He literally said, democracy depends on a free press. If no one's going to protect it, I will.
So safeguarding the information ecosystem as part of the future he wants.
Exactly. It's another piece of the puzzle. And you also see him making these preemptive funding moves, investing significantly in research on ocean health, on the ethics of artificial intelligence, even on pandemic preparedness, often long before these became mainstream headline concerns.
Ahead of the curve.
Consistently thinking several steps ahead, it seems. Not just reacting to today's problems, but anticipating and trying to shape the response to tomorrow's challenges.
So this is where that distinction you made really comes into focus, the difference between just giving back and actively buying into a specific version of the future.
Precisely. Benioff's approach seems fundamentally about architecting the world he wants to see. It's not about making amends for wealth accumulated in the past. It's about using resources, platform, and influence now to actively shape the world he and future generations will live in.
And you call this smart power.
Yes, I think it goes beyond soft power, which is often just about attraction or persuasion. This is smart power. It's strategic, it's targeted, it's highly impactful, and it yields very tangible returns in reputation, in influence, in shaping markets, in ensuring long-term societal stability, which ultimately benefits the business too.
And this level of influence, it really does seem to move Salesforce beyond just being a successful software company.
It elevates it into something more like a civilization-shaping force, arguably, which of course prompts us to think critically. How might this model of smart power philanthropy redefine the role we expect corporations and wealthy individuals to play in tackling the huge global challenges we face? What are the implications, both positive and potentially negative?
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot to chew on. We've covered so much ground today, from that really radical founding 1-1-1 model that seemed so counterintuitive back then,
Definitely against the grain.
to these massive billion-dollar scale investments that are actively trying to reshape our future, our planet, our society. So let's bring it home. What does all this mean for you, for someone listening right now who's maybe building a business, leading a team, or even just thinking about their own career path?
Well, I think Marc Benioff's journey with Salesforce is just a powerful masterclass in a different way of thinking about business. The key takeaway, he didn't wait until he'd already made it to start giving and thinking about purpose. He seemed to give in order to make it.
Purpose wasn't the result of success, it was the driver.
Exactly. He fused purpose and profit right from the very beginning. And he demonstrated, pretty convincingly, I think, that these two forces don't have to be in conflict. They can actually coexist and powerfully reinforce each other, leading to pretty extraordinary growth and influence.
So the core lessons we can pull from this deep dive seem clear. First, giving, when done strategically, doesn't actually weaken a business. It can profoundly strengthen its identity, its brand, its resilience.
Builds that moat.
Right. Second, philanthropy isn't just about generosity. It can be a powerful form of strategic direction, guiding where the company goes and the kind of impact it wants to have.
A compass, as you said earlier.
Yeah, a compass. And maybe most importantly, success isn't just measured by what you earn, by the numbers on the spreadsheet. It's truly defined by what you enable, the positive change you help create in the world. Salesforce hitting $250 billion. It wasn't despite its values. Arguably, it was significantly because of them.
The values were the multiplier.
Exactly. Benioff made ESG a core strategy, not a side issue. He turned culture into this powerful engine for growth and loyalty. And he used philanthropy as a fundamental playbook for long-term business success and influence.
So for anyone listening, leaders, founders, anyone building anything today, whether it's a huge company or a small team, or even just your own personal brand, the lesson from Benioff seems undeniably clear. Don't wait for success to magically reveal your purpose.
Start with purpose.
Yes. Start with purpose. Define it early. Embed it deeply. And then let that purpose guide your actions. Let it shape your strategy. and allows success to find you, perhaps, as a direct consequence of that commitment.
That's powerful.
And if our conversation today about Benioff's strategic generosity has maybe shifted something in how you think, even just a little bit, well, good. That was kind of the point, wasn't it?
Yeah, to make you think differently.
Because Marc Benioff's journey, it isn't just about Salesforce or philanthropy tech or building billion-dollar empires. It's really about what can happen when someone dares to lead with heart, with genuine compassion, and figures out how to do that at an absolutely massive scale.
And the real question for the listener isn't the $300 million figure.
No, definitely not. Most of us aren't dealing with those kinds of numbers. The deeper question for you is probably, what am I building right now that's actually bigger than just me, bigger than my immediate targets or goals?
This is the larger purpose.
Exactly. What values do I want to embody so authentically, so consistently that other people, my team, my customers, my community, can't help but feel them, be influenced by them, maybe even be inspired by them too?
That's the real challenge.
It is. So whether you're meticulously crafting a new startup or carefully building a high-performing team, or even just thoughtfully shaping your own future and the legacy you want to leave, let the story be your permission, perhaps. Permission to start from a place of genuine purpose.
To treat giving not just as charity.
Right, not as an obligation or charity, but maybe as a dynamic blueprint for growth, for connection, for resilience. And to always remember this core idea, power that is genuinely built on purpose. It doesn't just last longer, it inspires so much more.